All right, we're here.
Yes, it
Wondering
begins.
if we want to introduce ourselves so people know.
I guess that makes sense.
You want to go first?
Sure. Oh wow, it's so like rare that I'm actually like introducing myself recently. I'm doing so much one-on-one. So I'm Michael McDonald, a transformational coach based in Oakland. And is there anything else I want to say about myself?
Great introduction.
Yeah. And like a lot of my grounding is in the stuff that Kevin and I are going to be geeking out about.
Awesome.
So who are you?
Yeah, I'm Kevin Lawrence and also a transformational coach. That feels, yeah. And I guess that just weaves into like the context of like this conversation be us. Yeah, it's just us geeking out on the stuff that we've found, like some of the stuff that we found to be the big catalyst for change and for transformation, like sharing like some of the highest leverage stuff that we've seen, that we've discovered.
Yeah. And because we chat a little bit over email about like where to begin. Um, the thing that I like sort of like had a snapshot on first was a little bit from the introduction to BJ Fogg's Tiny Habits book, where his like research lab had done research on what are the things that had the biggest change for people. Like what were the sources of biggest change? And there were three of them that he found. Like one was environment. So like changing who you're with, what's going on, like your situation, the more like outer world, changing that radically, like creates big change for people. Makes sense, not always the easiest thing to do, but if you can do it, great. And what he focused on was small habits, like consistency over time, the power of that momentum. And like that became his work. And he also mentioned a third thing, which was I forget the word that he used, but basically it's insight. Having like a paradigm shift of like, oh, I thought the world was this way and I don't, and it's actually this way. But his response to that was like, I'm not a magician. I don't know how to do that. So let's talk about habits.
Mm-hmm.
And reading that, she was like, oh, I have this magical power.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And like that's the stuff that I've gotten, like that's the stuff I'm always like interested in the most within coaching.
Same.
I've geeked out about habits as well and gone deep there, but I'm as a coach, like as a coach compared to a therapist, like you have an initial session with someone and if nothing happens but they just feel a little bit better, like they're not a client. Like you don't have a business if you're not making much of an impact on someone quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And also just like realizing that it's possible to have profound impact on someone and like what are the things that do that,
Mm-hmm.
what makes it possible for someone's life to change completely in a moment, like within a single coaching conversation or just like one of the conversations along the line or many of the conversations, many changes in life. So I've always been looking for those. And yeah, like finding like higher and higher leverage ones. And sort of like the topic for today is like the highest leverage that both of us have found.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, any any introductory thoughts about like context of change for you?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, just this idea, like insight, comes to mind as just being, and I just feel that this fascination of it, like it is the most. It's like it is like magic, like having these experiences both myself and with clients where like it is just like you you see something new. It sort of just comes in, like it's not thinking, you didn't think it through, you weren't trying to figure anything out, but suddenly you see something that's been there the whole time, and changes everything, and it opens up, like suddenly life, whatever it is, becomes more simple, more amazing. Like you just feel better, and it just can happen in an instant. And it seems to me like the more that I look in that direction, like some of the directions we're going to be talking about, it's like kind of like I'm like thing on my edge lately is like, because a lot of things the last year and a half, 2 years of just like more insights, just like more stuff just falling away, falling away, falling away. And it's like, how far is, how good can this get? Like this is, I before finding this stuff, I did so much, like I've been doing transformational work for maybe, like intentionally for, I don't know, like over 10 years. And it's been more recently this stuff. And it's like, this stuff is just the best. Like, it's just like, holy shit. Like, this stuff is, how far does this go?
Yeah, and I sometimes think of it as like this stuff, or we'll just call like insight stuff for the moment. Like there's so many different terms and
Yeah, I
labels
like
we can
that
put on it.
technical name, insight stuff.
Insight stuff. Um, it's both sort of like stuff that's better, but it's also just stuff that, or like it's an understanding that makes everything better.
Mm-hmm.
Like part of my journey, I was an energy healer for 6 years or so, going deep into that world, like looking for the magic and the miracles that happens there, where there's like a moment and suddenly someone's life is different afterwards, like something shifts, something releases. I also noticed, like, as I started to understand more, as I like got this understanding more, it became a lot easier and more effortless to do energy healing.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes a lot easier and more effortless to do habit work.
Mm-hmm.
It became easier and a lot more effortless to like change my psychology, or let my psychology just rearrange itself.
Mm-hmm.
Like the whole of transformational work has like shifted more and more from like something like stuff that you need to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because so much of transformation is okay, well, like now that you realize that this is the way things work, you need to work hard at this, and you need to
Mm-hmm.
do a lot every day. Like you needed to put in like hours of practice.
Like once you heal this trauma, like I was in that for a while. It was like finding trauma work, somatic work, and like having those experiences. But without this understanding, it became sort of this like, oh, like what piece of trauma or what thing do I need to go in and do to like then be, okay. And but it just kind of never really like, it's hard to explain, but it's kind of just like,
Yeah, there's like a rubber band effect for most psychological and transformational work.
hmm,
Like you get some more room, but you can only go so far, because there's still a context of, yeah, this is hard, and um like you'll never actually like escape this. You just need to like work hard and try a lot.
mhm,
And like you might improve slowly over time. So like there's a lot of like incremental improvement, and that's great. Actually, that's often an upgrade from like Freudian therapy. It's like, at least like with a lot of empowerment work, you're incrementally improving. But this is like every once in a while, like you'll be incrementally improving, but every once in a while someone just like jumps, and like they have an insight, and like, oh my God.
mhm.
And they're just, life is different. And yeah, that's what interests me.
Me too. Yeah. Yep.
Like that miracles can happen. And it seems when you're trying to make them happen, it doesn't work that way. So
Mhm, mhm,
yeah, and like these are the insights that I had that like help make that much more common,
mhm.
like almost kind of inevitable, going in this direction.
It does seem to me like completely inevitable. Like we don't, like we can't control when, but it does look like that. Like it will happen. Like insights are like, it looks to me like they're wanting to happen. They're always there. And then like we just get in the way of that a lot with like innocently, like with our thinking and like being caught up in stuff, but like they do just happen. Like,
Yeah, like, and that starts to speak to like one of the dimensions of talking about this. Probably like this whole thing will just be for like describing the elephant, but we can't point like directly at the elephant. So like one of the parts of the element is, yeah, like there's an intelligence to like everything.
mhm,
Like everything's connected. There's an intelligence to the universe, and there's actually like it's got a good direction to it. The Tao Te Ching is one of my favorite descriptions of this. Like, note that you can't like do the Tao Te Ching. It's just a description,
mhm,
kind of vague, and it knows it. Like the Tao that can be told is not the true Tao. Of like, there's things that want to happen. There's an intelligent direction to things. Like I've been writing quotes for I don't know how many years now. It might be like 6 or 7 or more years now. But my favorite quote still by far is something awesome is trying to happen and your job is to allow it. So like allowing I've become fascinated with. And it's like when we're less identified with me, personal self, ego, and the sense of there's something that's wanting to happen through us, and allowing that into the world, allowing that to move us, like that's when both cool things happen in the world, but also like that's the force of healing. Like
mhm,
we were taught that in the healing school that I was in, like that there's an intelligence to the energy, and that it's mostly about just like allowing that energy to do its work. But alongside that, we were taught a lot of the psychological stuff too. It's like, yeah, there's this intelligent energy where you're just supposed to get out of the way, but there's also a lot of work to do. There's a lot of things to figure out, and there's a lot of things to make sure of, and like things to practice. And I recognize that kind of dampened the like the healing
mhm.
that was trying to happen. And yeah, and this is like one of the first things that I like want people to know about, is that it's what we usually refer to as wisdom. Um, that it's there. It's just that almost no one is accessing it.
Like it's been so like mind blowing for me. And even like I had heard like I had a concept of that before, of like intuition, wisdom, but that's so different to like now where it's like deeper in of just like knowing. It's like, oh, like it is just there all the time in me, in you, in everybody. And like I'm reflecting in this moment on like that distinction of like before really seeing that, like if I'm sitting with somebody and I don't totally know that they have wisdom, there's a lot of just like getting in the way. It's like so much getting in the way. But when there's just like, oh, I know this person, or I know I have wisdom, I know it's there, even if really struggling at the moment or whatever it is, the more that somebody knows that it's there all the time, it's like, oh,
Yeah, like work, like change work, support, what actually like whatever that's wisdom aware.
ooh,
It's
I like the wisdom aware is a good. I like that.
yeah, it shifts from an approach which is additive Like, what do I need to do? What do I need to develop? What do I need to practice? What skills do I need to have? What capacities? What strength do I need to develop? To an approach which is subtractive. Like, how am I getting in the way of allowing this? Like, it's a complete shift in gravity. And like, I first heard about this from like Tim Galway's work on performance, like who like is like talks about high performance. I think his first book was Inner Game of Tennis, and or Inner Game of Golf was one of those two. And
tennis.
Okay. But yeah, he has this model of like, instead of adding skills, it's performance is capacity minus interference. So instead of thinking like performance is talent plus skill and practice, it's you have this capacity, what's getting in the way of that? Like, what are you doing that's getting in the way? And this work is like, where's all the efforting, where's all the figuring out, where's all the, like the clinging to things that gets in the way of wisdom? Where are all the ways that we're like looking away from wisdom? Or for most of transformation land, false wisdom, like wisdom approximations. Like,
give me what's an example of a wisdom approximation?
Like, pretty much everything we're talking about, people have heard of before, and they have the language for, and they might be teaching to other people. But just the words, the idea, the concept, that's an approximation. Like, there's the difference between we're all connected and getting that as a logical and conceptual and like kind of feels nice, to like, oh, like actually having a deeper experience of the oneness, having a deeper experience of being with someone and actually seeing that namaste space of like, whoa, like this actually is like greater consciousness me looking back at myself, like two waves greeting each other, recognizing the ocean. Like that's an insight when you actually feel that, experience that. Before that, it's just a nice idea. And if you're just holding on to the nice ideas, that's wisdom approximation.
Beautiful. I love it. Yeah, it has me think of I think it's Peter Ralston's like the Book of Not Knowing, or like he was the first I heard him. Just I love the analogy of like it's like the difference between a picture of a hamburger on a menu versus like eating a hamburger. It's like they're really different. Like
You don't want to eat the menu.
If you're hungry and like you have a bunch of menus and like it doesn't do anything for you. Like it points to something, but like it's not the hamburger.
Yeah, and insight is like eating the hamburger. Like it's why you can't just like tell someone your insights. But if someone's describing eating a hamburger, some of it might transmit. You might start experiencing the hamburger. And that's a bit more of the insight. Yeah. And yeah, so just focusing on wisdom for a while at the beginning here. Like, we underestimate how much wisdom is always there and it's everywhere. And it's not conditional. We project all sorts of personal stuff onto it. We anthropomorphize it. We think that has an attitude. We think that it's available in these places, but not these places. We think it's available, but not in these situations, or when it gets to this degree. It's like, sure, wisdom is available, but when it comes to making a big life decision, no. Sure, wisdom is available. Yeah, but trauma, suddenly wisdom's not available. yeah, sure, wisdom is available, but not in my business or not in my relationship. It doesn't seem to be available there. Like we have all sorts of that's where
And
we
then
get in the
so
way.
easy for them to like, well, there must be something I must need to do to like cultivate more of it. Like I need to work harder in that spot so that which actually just takes you further away. Like I love the distinction of it's like wisdom. I'm either like connected to wisdom. There's like wisdom, or it's like caught up in some form of thinking, some version of the picture of the hamburger,
Hmm.
and like getting a feel for that difference. Like you can like that's the cool thing about it too. Like you can feel like if you're hanging out in your body and you start to you can like notice when like when you're chewing on the menu, like it'll start to like it's like you get really good feedback, like it's like you're not getting fed by it, and then like you start to like kind of feel like it's like yeah, that's a sign that you're chewing on the menu, and like nothing you need to do or fix or figure out or any of that, but just seeing it for what like the insight of like, oh, I'm chewing on the menu again. Hmm.
Yeah. And culturally, we have been taught that when we get that feeling of chewing on the menu, we're not chewing hard enough.
Hmm. That's what I did most of my life before finding this stuff. Yeah.
Like when you get this kind of feeling, well, like you're not chewing hard enough, or you need to chew on a different menu.
Hmm.
Like you need to chew on the pitcher of a salad.
The hamburger's not worth. I this. Yep.
Yeah. And like to map the chewing on the menu metaphor to like people's experience. Like I describe the feeling of chewing on on the menu as suffering.
Hmm.
Like it's like suffering is letting us know that we're chewing on the menu,
Hmm.
that we're caught up, we're in our thinking, we're in our models, we're suffering because we're not in alignment because we've mistaken a menu for a hamburger. And it's this great mechanism that we have of suffering, which like thank God we have suffering because it's letting us know, hey, no, dude, that's a menu. The thing is we've got something backwards where we think when we're suffering, like we react in the wrong direction culturally, like that we've been trained to innocently.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, obviously it's this horrible thing in the world that's causing the suffering, so I need to react in this way. And we feel worse, which is supposed to let us know that we're heading in the wrong direction, but we can't keep heading in the wrong direction
Hmm.
until we have some sort of like hit rock bottom, and then sometimes we get access to wisdom there.
Like we finally give up. Like we find like we've eaten enough menus, and it's like, okay, this is definitely not working.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Yep.
Yeah, rock bottom is the point where you realize you might be wrong
Yeah.
about what you've been like something you've been believing is wrong, so you give up.
Hmm.
Yeah, and like Byron Katie's one of the ones who like cemented that like suffering connection for me, that like suffering means that you're believing something that isn't true. Like if you want to feel fear, get yourself a future. If you want to feel bad about something, like think about it. And that experience over and over again through the work, like when you drop your thinking, it's like, oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking in this moment, just a memory of like it was like a first session with a client where like they came in, that 20 minutes into the conversation, just insight happened. It might have been a few even, just like a thing that like for 3 years they like this person just realized like I mean, to go along with the same metaphor, it's like they saw for themselves in a moment, like they just saw it, that like I've been chewing on like business menus for the last 3 years, and like that's why it hasn't been working. And oh my God, I I can just stop. And the whole thing that they were the whole thing just went poof, like poof. And that's one of my, and then I think of like some of my own personal things of like having health things go poof, like having very real in the body like things that, and there was a lot of like around it. And then once that went away, somehow these very real looking medical issues, like where'd they go? Like, like, whoa.
Yeah, like Michael Deal has a distinction between like thinking problems and real problems. And like the inquiry is, if you stopped thinking about this, would it go away? And of course, when people are in the thinking, they're going to answer no. But I'm really interested in helping support people to drop the thinking anyways, to see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because often there's something to do. Like I'll like not, it's not always that the medical problems go poof, but also I've been in this understanding long enough that I'm not surprised that miracles happen. Like I'm not as surprised by Anita Morjani's like miraculous cancer healing experience. Like, okay, like that makes sense in the way that I understand the world.
Yeah.
I can't make that happen, and the expectation of that happening might be really torturous to people who have cancer. But knowing it's a possibility and getting like really curious of like how much of what's going on is being created or maintained or whatever just by all the personal thinking.
Mm-hmm.
What might be possible when all the unnecessary personal thinking drops? And the cool thing is, because of wisdom, when that all drops and you have more and more and more access to wisdom, if there's something to do, that's like you just do it. It's just obvious. Like if you hate your job and like maybe like let go of all the hate thinking, and it might just be common sense to leave it, or you might suddenly start loving it or come up with some other idea rather than I need to. Yeah, this is something I see so often. I need to hate something a lot in order to change it. That's what happens in like a thinking world. You need to like think harder about things. So I need to like really hate this relationship in order to leave it. Or I need to, or sometimes it's sort of like a similar thing, but just a variation. I need to think positive about this thing that I hate. I need to overpower this hate with positive thinking. It's exhausting.
Yeah, it's like it's all just more thinking. It's all just more thinking on top of thinking on top, just different derivatives of overthinking,
Mm-hmm.
taking you further away from wisdom until you like see it and then drop it and come back and then
Yeah. So we all have access to wisdom. We all are wisdom. Almost none of us know it. Most of us are forgetting it.
mm-hmm.
Like especially where we've got a lot of thinking, especially where there's anything that's important or precious.
Mm-hmm.
Like so why do you think it's so like yeah, why do you think people are backwards?
Think you're, yeah, great question. I don't, I mean, one part of it seems to be that, like speaking from my own experience, like when I was really caught up in thinking, like it looks it looks really real when you're in it. And then if the only thing that, like it's sort of like if no one, like if you don't see the like it's just like this innocent, like I was before I was kind of in this other world of like menu eating and not and thinking like, oh, suffering, and then like freaking out about suffering, and then going in because it just that I didn't know there was another option. Like I just didn't. It couldn't. I just didn't know. And then so I'm stuck in that world. And then if I live in a world where everyone around me is also thinks that that's how it is too.
Hmm. Yeah, it also occurs to me like for people who have grown and they've like evolved into certain models, which have really helped them, created a lot of
Mhm.
healing and access and power and change in their life. But then they cling to those.
Yeah.
And it's hard to imagine that there's something more than that. Because I see a lot of that within transformation line. Like people like get to a certain degree and then there's a lot of like really it's often the like the better models, but people then get stuck in there and they can't imagine that there's a higher perspective,
Mhm.
that there's a higher level of awareness where you can actually like see past the model. You can see why the model is helpful, but also see how it's not completely true. Yeah, like I remember I had like one client who I began with doing a bunch of like parts work with for a while. And I remember like the look of horror on her face when I mentioned, by the way, parts aren't real.
Yep.
Like this is kind of an abstract way to point towards how you're organizing your thinking. And really the goal is to like be less identified with the thinking
Mhm.
rather than to get like more and more like, no, parts are things, parts are
Mhm.
true.
I definitely did that. Like I did a lot of like IFS was incredibly internal family systems was incredibly helpful for me. Like life change.
Mm-hmm.
And then it did get to a point where it sort of like it became for me this thing of like, okay, it's the beginning of the day and I want to maybe do this thing. I'm feeling some energy in my body. Ooh, let me slow down and like check in with my parts. And then I could spend so much time checking in with this part and then this part, any other parts, this part, and then like and then you and I have talked like parts can tend like kind of multiply and then suddenly it's like really complicated. Like it doesn't. It's like oh, okay, and then I must just need to like work hard. Okay, there's more to do. Wow, more stuff is, but it wasn't helpful anymore. And now it's more like yeah, like it's more like yeah, more just seeing like well, no, there's like I can make up part like seeing what parts are made up. Like they're like these clusters of thinking, and they're not real. Like they're not real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I use parts a lot as a metaphor for helping put language, like, or be able to like point towards what's going on for someone. So I still use a lot of that language as it's sort of like diagnostic rather than using the methodologies of parts work
Mm-hmm.
of like, yeah, okay, you've got these layers and managing. It's like there's like the self-like managers. Um, so it makes sense. Like it helps me and them make sense of everything that's going on for them.
Yeah, like you can see it. It's like, oh, that's what it is. You can point to the thing that it's like, oh, and it helps. Like it can help if you point to a part of me, and then we get to like play it out, and that it helps me see like, oh yeah, that okay, we can see that thing. Yeah, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like in parts language, so that's one of the things like love about it is like it gives us more ways to describe things. In parts language, most people still identify with their exiles. So they think they just need like better managers. They just need like to like better parts or more evolved parts. They kind of forget this beautiful part of IFS, which is the capital S self,
Mm-hmm.
which is who they really are.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much focus on technique, like do this, and but if you have the more you have an insight that you are the self, the more parts work just sort of automatically happens without you having to do anything.
Mhm.
And the less it even looks like parts work, the less they look like parts, because you're the self.
Mhm.
Like that's who you really are. And suddenly your psychology isn't so problematic anymore. It's just more entertaining and self-healing.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, look at me go.
Bubbling up in my mind, the I don't know if there's more here on this or on wisdom, but I also want to make sure we touch
There's
on,
some other parts of the elephant.
yeah, like the part of the elephant that's just like the like recognizing, like really recognizing in an embodied way that like, oh, I'm okay. Like I'm okay. I'm always okay. I've always been okay. And oh, like, oh, you are too. Oh my God, like we're all okay. Oh, again, another like just speaking for myself, if I as I've like discovered that, realized that, like got grounded deeper and deeper into that, life has become so much easier, so much more, just so much more, yeah, just easy. Like I feel more safe, more settled, more, but not, I haven't healed any, like I mean, I've healed some trauma along the way, and like that's been helpful, but so much of that has come from just really like knowing that I'm okay and you're okay. And if I'm talking to my partner and she's really going through something, or a client and they're really like, awesome, like cool, I'm here with you. And but also I know, like just knowing, like I also just know that you're okay. It's like I think about it lately. I've been thinking about it kind of like if you're with like a, if I was with like one of my nieces like at the pool and she like stubbed her toe, I'd like really be with, and she's crying and and I'd really be with her, but like I know she's okay. Like, and it's so simple, but like that has changed everything for me. So I'm curious what you see
Yeah.
there, like what's.
And I think that was my original, like in this work, this sort of like this insight work, one of the bits of advice that I got was find out like what's the insight that is like deepest, most true for you, most fundamental. And like just start with that. Because there's a lot of other insights which like the things that sound nice but you don't quite get. This is what I actually got first, I believe, was fundamental well-being. I think because my transformational work began like 15, 16 years ago with doing lots of circling work. So I got really good at understanding people's realities and understanding how just people have different psychologies, and that if you go into it, if you really get curious and get into their world, everything has this internal logic to it. So I saw like the innocence of their psychology. So everyone made sense. All the ways that people reacted made sense. And I got that just from that sort of like clarity, and from that, like everyone sort of fundamentally making sense the way that they're acting. It no longer looked like anyone was broken. The judgment went away. I became just non-judgmental to an unusual degree, where I just wasn't judging people, especially people that I'm supporting, as like good, bad, right, wrong. Just didn't make sense. It's more like, okay, it's just what's going on here. It's more just fascinated. And like that was an initial taste of just them being fundamentally okay. And as I got involved with like three principles work, which is another name for what we're pointing towards, one of my favorite stories was from Bill Pettit, who's a psychotherapist who had like amazing success rates with his patients. Like usually like 7% of people might recover, but for him it was like 90%. And one of his patients, who was like, he was assigned to her and she was like heavily medicated. She'd been in a mental hospital for I don't know, 10, 20 years. So she was just like sitting at a chair, drooling, non-responsive. And so he like sat down across from her, and she later was able to share. And after he connected with her a little bit, he just told her, it's like, you were completely mentally well. Like you have complete, like full mental well-being. And she had a cognizant thought, which was a very rare occurrence for her, which was like, oh my God, they've sent me a doctor crazier than I am. And like 2 weeks later, she was fine. Like she was checked out of the hospital. Like that that helped permission this insight to go deeper. Like people who have mental health issues, people who are trauma, people who are in the middle of like a traumatic episode, people who have health issues, people who have body issues, people who are dying or might be dying. There's a fundamental well-being still there, and it's more of a spiritual kind of thing that I'm connecting with now. Like I get that there's a ground. Also, some experience with Dzogchen meditation helped have a feeling and a description of there being something fundamental, unconditional. But I can see that in people now. Like I was supporting someone who is on a substance and having like a deep traumatic experience, like complete break, and like hitting themselves and face contorted and freaking out. And fortunately, like I'm not sure I would have trusted someone who's trauma informed with them, but someone who's like wisdom informed. Like I got to just sit with her because I knew she was okay. And like that got underneath the huge process that was going on for her. I ended up sitting with her for like 4 hours and like just healing multiple layers of stuff throughout her life. So it was quite a masterclass in healing, but it was basically just knowing that she was fundamentally okay.
Yeah,
was what I did. Any types of interventions I did like actually didn't work. It just kind of distracted. It's like, nope, okay, I'll just go back to seeing that you're okay. Yeah, so that's another piece of the elephant. Like fundamental well-being. Yeah, and actually like those two together, like well-being and wisdom, like we don't really need to know what to do or have that much skill as coaches. I mean, there's so much that we did.
As any, like in anything you do, like if you really just know that you're okay and everybody's okay and you have wisdom and they have wisdom, it's a totally different game than the like, I'm not okay and you're not okay, but we'll be okay once we get there or that happens. And also like we really got to like work hard and figure it out to get there. Like just two completely different experiences of being a human.
Yeah. And one of like one of the things that comes to mind is that's sort of like a spiritual inquiry that's helped me deepen some of these, is just getting really curious about the idea of unconditional. Like unconditional well-being, unconditional love, unconditional wisdom. Yeah, and actually like there's the distinction of like form and formless, but like yeah, it's a beginning with unconditional well-being, this idea of like, yeah, like even if this is happening in the system right now, you're still okay. Even if you're dying, you're still okay. Even if climate change is going to end the world, or at least end the human race, we're still okay, fundamentally. And like tapping into something there. So like anywhere where it feels like there's like good, bad, right, wrong, sometimes I can use the trick of, okay, what's conditional here? What's something where I think that something in the outside world needs to be different for this to be fulfilled?
Yeah, pretty good clue.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that the suffering piece. It's like the same kind of like seeing suffering for what it is of like, oh, this is a clue I'm caught up, or seeing that like if I can see that myself or somebody else, it really looks to them like they're like this thing out there needs to change and then I'll be okay. Like,
Yeah, like the outside in worldview. Actually, for most people, it's sort of like it's some percent.
yeah,
It's like I know that like I'm making it kind of worse, but they did this. I really am a victim. I really am like just like helpless and there's nothing I can do. Like the world is just doing things to me. That's why I have to feel bad about it. It's like, yeah, well, innocently, that's an experience.
yeah, that was like I felt caught. I was like, ooh, that was me for a while. Like that was like, and still sometimes I'm sure I get caught, but like spent a lot more time in places like that in the past. Like it was maybe like knowing, like some part of me knowing this, the inside out nature of things. But then like, yeah, but not there, or but like, but not with this thing that's really important. Not, you know,
Mhm.
and then the more that it's like, oh no, it is just, oh, it's 100%. Oh, there's so much liberation there, so much freedom, so much relaxation.
Yeah. And my guess is we never fully get to the 100% insight. Like
Mm-hmm.
we thought we had 100%, then we realized like, oh wait, that might have been like 99,
Yeah,
101, or
for
that might
sure.
have actually been 50-50.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
And then you realize like, oh my God, I can let go of that.
Yeah.
Like that's where the stuff that we say just starts sounding like more and more woo woo, start more and more out there. And admittedly, it is for like people who are like earlier levels. Like it's not helpful for them to hear a lot of things that we're hearing. Like the words that we say when we have an insight just sound like a bypass to everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And if they were just the words, they probably would be.
Mm-hmm.
But the insight is like, oh, whoa. Like I love those. I love the like, oh my God.
It's like my favorite thing. It's like whatever that is. It's just so, yeah,
Mhm.
so cool.
Yeah, like that's the experience of an insight. Like it's sort of like a sudden relaxation. Yeah, it's often not super dramatic. It's more like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
oh, oh,
Mm-hmm.
let all that go.
Yeah. And the realization too that you can just let that happen too. Like that's coming to mind in this of like I'm thinking of like in the past I used to have a lot of it like I'd have an insight and then it almost immediately like, okay, let me make sure I like integrate the, like that kind of or that or like, ooh, let's have another insight or like it looking like I had to do something about the insight instead of just like continuing to just look back in the direction of the place where like the insights just keep coming and just like resting there versus going around trying to
Yeah.
collect insights and remember things and
I think that highlights the difference between an insight and a good idea as well.
ooh.
Good ideas we need to like collect and take notes of and remind ourselves of. Like useful perspectives,
Hmm.
which I'm totally a fan of as well. Like I'm still like collecting, like perhaps even more nowadays, useful perspectives and language, like geeking out about things, studying methodologies. But an insight, like you don't need to capture. It's more like a space that where you've let stuff go and permission to hang out a bit more there without trying to do anything about it, without trying to turn it into anything. Like you can't apply an insight. Insight is more of an unapplying.
Mhm.
Like it's taking off a layer. It's removing a veil
Yeah.
rather than playing with a new veil you just bought.
Anything else here? Any other like parts of the elephant that we want to point to or anything? Yeah, just related. That's
There's many. What's coming right now is it's something that's talked about a lot about within three principles world is the feeling. This this is another way of like um restating like the difference between insight and good idea or insight and personal thinking. Um yeah, like there's a feeling to wisdom. There's a feeling to this ground. There's a feeling to capital S self and IFS. There's this feeling of who you really are when you're not identified with your psychology, with your ego. And it's everything that we're searching for vigorously when we're thinking outside in. Like it's that space of peace and love and creativity and resourcefulness, resilience. It's that feeling of home. Like it's the neutral space when we're not doing anything, when we're not getting in the way. Instead of it just being blank, it's the richness that we're all searching frantically for when we think that it's conditional. And it's like right there for everyone, just underneath the surface.
yeah.
And they're innocently scrambling for it over here where without like noticing, like, what you're looking for is just right there.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's right behind you.
Mm-hmm.
Just like if you could just look turn around. And one of Sid's teachings that I love, and it's very similar to like that beginning of the Tao that can be told is not the true Tao. If you if you start to have a beautiful feeling, he would say on the tapes that he originally recorded,
Yeah.
take the tape out of the
You
player
got
and
it.
toss it
You're
out the
good.
window.
Yeah. Just hang out with that feeling and let it have its way with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, and that's why like these articulations of it are like fun and such, but they don't really mean much until you've had the insight.
Yeah. Yep.
Like this is just gobbledygook, sounds
Yep.
nice, woo woo. Then you have the insight. It's like that's what they were talking about.
Yeah. That has me think of like listening. That's been such a
Mm.
helpful pointer for me of like really it's helped me find that good feeling. Like the distinction between of like listening but with some chatter going on or listening with like okay I'm listening so that hopefully like I can hear the thing that you're saying so I can get an insight or I'm like trying to find something or I'm comparing this to other things I know or like I don't agree with that just any of that it's like
Mhm. I
that's
felt
called
myself even going into my head as you're doing like starting to space out as you're talking about that. It's like, oh, what were you saying?
uh-huh yeah so not that but like just listening and like listening to this listening like when I'm hearing you speak even listening to myself as this is coming through like I can listen to this more from the place of like kind of like I'm watching a movie or like it's the end of the day and I'm like relaxing just listening to a piece of music and just like actually just listening to it for me that's been a it helps me connect to that it helps me drop the thing right it's like oh I have permission to wait you're saying I could just listen and a bunch of good stuff is going to happen and I'm going to have insights from oh that seems way easier and it is and it's proved incredibly reliable for me to just hang out and just listen and
And
see
it's
what
like
happens
it's like it becomes wisdom, like you become wisdom listening to wisdom.
Mhm.
And like one of the common objections I hear to that is, but like if I just listen, then like I won't have, I'll be doing dumb things, or I'll be doing nothing.
Mhm.
It's like this accusation that like everyone thinks that wisdom is an idiot. They're in their personal thinking. Like it's a moron that doesn't take anything into account, unaware of the world, unaware of like any like skills, capacity, learning. Because but really like wisdom is access to everything. It's transrational rather than rational.
Mhm.
Yeah, like it's knows how much to think about something, how much to plan for something. Like it's probably really, really wise to be really anal retentive about planning a space shuttle launch. And there's a lot of other things where it's like you probably don't want to be really, really planning how a date is going to go.
Mhm.
Like wisdom lets you know it's like when to like go Google something.
Mhm.
Wisdom lets you know if it's a good idea to practice something or a lot or not. One of the things I've realized, because I've both geeked out in like the habits and discipline world, as well as this sort of like wisdom spiritual world, and I realized like, oh, as long as like structure and discipline is secondary, like it can be prompted and emerge from wisdom, just as the ego is meant to be secondary to like the receptive mind, to awareness. Like even Ian McGilchrist's work on like the left and right hemispheres and the roles that they play and which one is supposed to be in charge, like reflects this. So like even the neuroscience
Mhm.
supports this as well. Like our personal idea of self figuring it out brain is meant to be secondary. It's meant to be used as a tool that we can pick up and put down. But when it's in charge, and it is for most of us, and it is for us like culturally, so it's being reinforced and we're surrounded by it. Like if we just end up being ruled by old ideas and losing access to wisdom, or just not even really losing access, um, culturally being blinded to the
Yeah,
presence
just
of it
not
right there.
like I'm going back to the menu metaphor. It's like being like eating all the
There is no
menu.
hamburger. There's only menus.
Yeah, and then versus oh there's been a, oh there's unlimited hamburgers. All of it if I look in this direction. Like, oh.
Hamburgers all the way down.
Mhm. Oh.
There's something I was starting to think about, but I lost it. Oh well.
Yeah, I wonder, yeah, maybe there's more and maybe ending on hamburgers all the way down is the, yeah, anything else, something popping?
Um, there's both a little bit of context for this. Yeah, like we've been talking around this. I think I might like speak to the three principles a little bit more, since it's like the most central. Like, yeah, three principles is sort of the body of work, uh, initiated by a guy who had an enlightenment experience, Sid Banks, and it's an articulation. Like it's a way of pointing towards what we're pointing towards, and it's one of my favorite spiritual explorations because it doesn't have a lot of the stuff that you find in almost all the other spiritual stuff. Like there's no practice. There's nothing that you need to do. There's no particular technique like there is with Byron Katie's work. Like you don't have to meditate like with Dzogchen work. It's more like it's probably similar to the Tao Te Ching. It's a description of like, oh, this is how everything works. Like this is how the human experience works. This is what's going on.
Mhm.
And one of the things I find revolutionary about it, and starts pointing actually towards that unconditional thing I was talking about, it's pointing towards truth, like spiritual truth. And it has up-leveled a kind of truth that I didn't even really think about or believe in the past. Like most people toss around the word truth or use the word truth. I don't want to be dismissive of how they use it. They use the word truth in a lot of ways. In my community, there's a lot of truth about systems. Yeah, but like oppression is true, and this is true, and climate change is true. And like really, those are just very, very helpful metaphors to make sense of the world. But three principles actually is very closely pointing towards a very few things that are absolutely true. And when you get that they're true, a lot of like it's how everyone has things backwards. It's kind of like if you make this shift, if you like get the three principles, all the other things that are backwards gradually start righting themselves. All the misunderstandings start like reorienting. It's really high level. It's the highest level change, like opportunity for change that I've encountered so far in all the work that I've seen. Like if you get that there's fundamental well-being for everyone, suddenly just everything frees up. If you get that everyone has access to and is wisdom, like if people realize and some like if they realize that they're spirit, they realize that they're God, they realize that they are made up of the intelligence of the universe, suddenly all these petty psychological things just reorient themselves or release. If people really get that what they're experiencing is an internal experience, that their experience thought in the moment, like they're never actually experiencing the past or the future, they're never actually experiencing the outside world, they're experiencing like this matrix within, and get that doesn't imply anything about what to do or imply anything about there being an outside world that they're interacting with in some way. That starts shifting everything. And the more that people see this clearer and clearer, the more like both it just heals everything, but also miracles start becoming commonplace. And there's so much more freedom to create. And like, yeah, like that's what the three principles are just articulations of what's fundamentally true. I wonder if the things we've been talking about, I don't think they perfectly line up with mind, consciousness, and thought, which are the three principles. But that, like, yeah, there's an intelligence to everything that's mind. There's a kind of like we are awareness, like there is the capacity, there is an experiencing that's consciousness. It's like in many spiritual traditions, you like it arrives at, okay, we are all awareness. Like that's one of the things that just unconditional. And thought, like our experiences inside out 100%. And that's not yet quite one of my like most central groundings. Like a fundamental well-being and wisdom is getting like very strong, but being able to point towards it being completely inside out, still I've got some more insight to go there. So it doesn't feel quite as like, I don't feel quite as authoritative pointing towards that one. But I've been around a lot of other people who totally see it. and they're just such ease and playfulness and creativity with the content of their life inside. And I really think that understanding this is going to make it so much easier to change the world. Like, yeah,
It's really clear from my view, like, of just, it seems really, it's just like that, it just, yes. And I could, yeah, keep going, but I see the same thing. I'm just, because that's what it's, yeah, anyway, I could riff on that a lot, but
because it's really woo-woo and it's really spiritual and it's really sounds quite philosophical, and it's very much involved with just sort of like good feelings. With there's a lot of talking about doing nothing and not addressing real world stuff. But this shift, like this leap from like here to here, is these vertical leaps are some of the most practical changes and some of the like that can have the biggest impact both personally and in like people's work and on the world. Like if you have, yeah, actually I think of like the kid who came up with the idea for like cleaning up the oceans, and I don't remember how old he was. It might have been like, I don't know, somewhere in his teens, maybe like 11, 17, something like that, and just had an insight, like had a stroke of genius. Like this is something that people have spent their entire lives trying to figure out, and like experts and a kid just had an idea.
mhm.
Like that's the power of insight. And what we don't need more activists. We don't need more people who are crying about how horrible the world is and how horrible the situation is. We need some of that just so that people are aware. Um, but it's like we need more people who aren't caught up in it, see that like what's going on everywhere is lots of misunderstanding, and just being immersed in wisdom so that like they can have fresh thinking, fresh ideas, and bring in a little bit of Steve Chandler wisdom to be experimenting, to be taking action, to be trying things. Like I think one of the things that's sometimes lost in having the spiritual conversation is insight comes with action. If you're not doing something, you probably didn't have it. Like, well, perhaps I'll say like insight comes with integration. Like it immediately changes how you're living. It immediately changes how you're behaving. You might stop doing something or start doing something. If you're procrastinating, you might have an insight where you just start doing the thing. So like insights are alive. They don't stop at just a good feeling or just a good idea. It's like you become different. How you're living life immediately becomes different because you've hopped into a new, better reality. So yeah, it's like it's part of how to change the world is you have an insight and you'll just start changing the world. And it and you don't know what it's going to look like over there. Like you don't like we think we know what we're going to do when we have an insight. That's one of the things that keeps us from having insight. We don't know what it's going to look like. Like it's unpredictable. Those are some of the bits of the elephant.
Beautiful. That was fun.
Mm. Anything else?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Like there's a thread here. I'm not sure if following it, but just like like the more like personal thread, like just some of like speaking a bit to like like everything you're saying about changing the world in this way, and part of how I know what, like, I just like I see the same thing, and part of that has come just from me, from this work finding me finding this work and experiencing all of that stuff in my world, like where I was 2 years ago, like, and you know this, like you've
Mhm.
been my coach, like we've, it's like mind blowing, like it really is, of like how much is possible and how much can shift with this, yeah, this woo woo weird stuff that's like, what do they talk, it's like it's like it's changed everything.
Yeah, it's like a permissioning,
Mm.
like along the path of exploring this, permission to not try to figure it out, permission to be like disoriented, permission for it to be weird,
Yeah,
lots of permission to not know.
yeah, that's another big, I don't know if that's like part of, but the the not knowing piece, like I don't know if that's part of the elephant or not, but like that's a really help, especially with this kind, with everything, but with this kind of stuff, it's like yeah, permission to not know and looking in the direction, like enjoy, like being able to like hang out and not knowing, and giving your permission for that to be like fun and enjoyable, and just okay, like okay to not know, versus I don't know and like, oh shit, that's a problem and I need to figure it out. Like that's been another, I mean, just total, everything gets so much easier, more wisdom, more the more that I'm just like okay with not knowing.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I like about the feeling as well, like focusing on like that good feeling. I think that helps support not
Yeah,
knowing,
yeah.
like because there's still sort of like a permission to follow something. Sort of like with like meditation, it's often easier if there's like something to focus on, like the breath or a mantra. But if you're kind of like focused on if getting a feel for this good feeling of the fundamental space, helps give a lot of people a little bit more permission to not know, a little bit more permission for the ego to fall away, like permission for the ego death to happen.
Mm.
So that's like, okay, well, I'm dying, but there's sort of a good feeling here. And a little part of me knows that physically I'm just sitting in a room, so I'm fine. It's not a physical death. So like, okay, go with it. And yeah, it's like it's falling into like your natural self, which like is has always been there, but we've just been trained away from and forgotten. Like it's almost like we're terrified to go home and we're seeking home desperately.
Mhm.
But once you get there, it's just like, oh, I don't know what the whole big deal was.
Yeah.
But yeah, like not knowing being one of the doorways, like permission to have be completely clueless and confused and nothing makes sense. And that's where you have the opportunity to see something new
Mhm.
and the opportunity for old thinking to at least temporarily subside so you can see a bit more clearly. Yeah, there's sort of like a thing that happens in these conversations where eventually it just gets to like the good feeling and there's nothing else to say. And it's just like, yeah, wow,
Yeah.
cool.
Cool. Mm.
Well, thank you for the invitation to create this little chat.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. This is fun. Mhm.
Anything we want to do to close, or shall we just say goodbye?
Yeah, nothing really occurs to me. I mean, I suppose there's the like, where can people find you
Oh yeah,
type of thing. And yeah,
yeah. So we'll do that. Just the short version. So I'm Michael McDonald. I can be found at authenticintegrity.com. My email is michael@authenticintegrity.com.
yeah. Kevin Lawrence. You can find me at kevinlawrence.org or email me at kevin@kevinlawrence.org.
We're all official now. Like we're also human beings with coaching businesses.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.